from where you get the requirement, the artifact or the stakeholder. You need to come up with the stakeholder or artifact that actually come up with the requirement, which is the source of requirement. Requirement rationale. Why this requirement is important? Why it is implemented? Requirement to requirement. This is a common one. Requirement to requirement. One requirement affect which requirement. One requirement depending on what are the requirements. Okay. One requirement architecture traceability. Affect what are the components. One requirement affect which document, design specification. Okay. One requirement affect what are the design specification. The link between the requirement and UI, user interface. The link between the requirement and the functions. One requirement, what are the functions affected? One requirement, what are the test plan, test cases are affected? One requirement, what are the source code for the requirement? So all these are types of traceability. Okay? Okay, this is how we document if you want to do manually. So this is what user requirement. Okay, you can put any ID. This is one of the practice examples. Okay, so this is the requirement ID. Requirement ID. This is the functions for that requirement ID. This is the design specification, and this is the source code, the function, the real function, the code. Okay, and this is the test case number, test case ID. You understand? So for this use case, this is the user requirement. This is the what do you call that? Design, code, and test. Okay, and function, feature. That's why I asked you to, when you do your assignment, right, you must have your functional requirement ID. So I asked you to use numbering. Remember 1.1, 1.2, 1.1.1. Because on the link, depends on a fact. So this is definition of link. You need to know how you are defining, okay, the link. Then you need to know the process, the representation, okay, and also your policy. What policy are you applying on doing your traceability? There are so many ways. So you need to choose one and follow them. Okay? Okay, traceability process, define the traceability policy. As I said, you need to identify one policy that you're going to use. Okay, establish the traceability link based on the policy and then exploit your traceability links and finally maintain. Once you exploit, it's completed. So now you just need to maintain. Why need to maintain? Because the changes will be from time to time. And the document, the requirement can be increasing from time to time. So more requirement will come in, right? So you need to maintain the traceability. Okay? When changes are there, you need to maintain. Okay, Praveen? So these are the 4 steps. Okay, now measurement matrix. Okay, what kind of matrix? So you have 2 actually, project matrix and quality matrix. Okay, let's look at the project matrix. You know what is matrix? What is matrix? Can anyone define matrix? What is matrix, ma'am? Hello, what is matrix? For what do you use matrix? When you want to measure. When you want to measure something, you need matrix. Okay? So let's look at project matrix. Project matrix, very obvious, right? The overall project matrix. So you can example of project matrix, productivity. Your team member. You know your team member, you assign 2 tasks. You want to see how much of tasks are they completing every day. So that is actually one example of productivity matrix. Okay, so which is under project matrix. Okay, other than that, how much of how much of development have been completed? Okay, within the given schedule. Okay, given time. So that is another example of project matrix. Okay, as you can see here, okay, completeness, status of your project. All this can be example of project matrix. It's all about your project progress, your development. Okay, so coverage. Yeah, how many requirements have been covered after 3 months? How many requirements have been completed after 6 months? How many requirements have been implemented after 8 months or 9 months? So that is also another example of matrix for project. Okay. So what about quality? Quality matrix. Quality matrix. When you do validation and verification, right? You have so many requirements, right? Okay. You have to have the count of requirement. Okay, let's say module 1, I have 20 requirement. In module 1, 20 requirement. How many requirement remain the same? How many requirement need to be changed after the review? Need to be changed means got error, bugs. So how many requirement undergo changes? How many requirement will remain? So out of 20 requirement, let's say only 2 requirement need to change. So 2 out of 20 times 100. So only how many? 21 to 10, 10%. Only 10% of the requirement go through changes after review. So that is measurement matrix. Quality. Good or not? Only 10% change after the first review. Very good. Because usually all the requirement will change or most of the requirement will change. Your first review, only 2 requirement change out of 20. Out of 20 for one module. Consider 10%. Very good. You understand or not? That's how you measure. Clear? So that is example of quality. Why quality? Because you are seeing the quality of your requirement document. Correct? Another example, derivation. All requirement are traceable back to stakeholder. So you have, let's say, 100 requirement in your document. You are trying to find the source. You know what is source? Where do you get the requirement from? Out of 100 requirement, how many requirement you manage to find the source? Who give you the requirement or where you get the requirement from? So how many requirement you manage to get the source? Trace back to the source. If you manage to get all the requirement source, 100% can trace back to the source. Quality is good. If none of the requirement you manage to find the source, who give you the requirement or which artifact you got the requirement from, then your quality is very, very poor. So this is an example. You won't get all or like all fail. It depends on the project. Okay, so this is just an example. Okay, so you can have other metrics as well. Okay. Okay. What is scalability? Yeah, what is scalability? Your final year project, when you approach your supervisor, right, they always look at this. How big is your project? How big is your scope? Scalability. When your scope is too small, too simple, for one student, you propose only a simple system with 3 modules. They see what are the features you cover in each module. How many requirements are there? Then they see, oh, very simple project. You are not, okay, not to say you cannot do, but very difficult to get A. Example. So that is called scalability. So beginning 50 features. At the end, can come up with 5,000. You know why? Why? Always the requirements go through a lot of changes. So when requirements go through changes, okay, obviously requirement will either increase or decrease. So at the end, sometimes requirement can end up with growing too many, too big. Okay? So that is called scalability. Okay? Okay, the project size lah. Usually project size is scalability. Okay, you can determine the size through the scalability. Okay, tool support. Yeah, last one. Okay, there are so many tools we use for requirement management, especially change management. So many tools. I remember my previous companies that I worked. One of the company they use database with Excel. Okay, they did a simple programming. They didn't subscribe any tool because it's a small company, considered small company. So they don't want to spend on requirement engineering tool. They use their own Excel form, simple programming, okay, with database, into the database. So they manage through the simple Excel form to keep track of all their requirement and changes. So that is actually example of it. Okay, so here you have so many tools you can see. Yeah, you can just use Word. You can use Word. You can go for spreadsheet like I said, Excel, like my company used last time. Okay, industrial strength, commercial RM tool, requirement management tool. Okay, internal tool, open source, bug tracking, collaboration tools, prototyping and modeling tools like Visual Basic. Okay, we always use IBM for us. Okay, yes. Okay, so there are so many tools can be used in requirement change management and requirement engineering. Okay, what are the capabilities of tool? What tool can do? If no tool, can we still go for requirement engineering? Yes, of course can. But how tool can assist you? Okay, these are the things. Okay, tool can actually help you to manage requirement. What is manage? All these are activities of managed requirement. Tool can help. You know what is managed requirement? Like just now, who actually come up with the requirement? You can keep track of the source. Whoever make changes to the requirement, you can keep track of the changes. All those things are managed requirement. Capture the requirement. Finding, getting the requirement. So like adding new requirement, delete requirement, updating requirement, all those things comes under capture. Access tool help. Yeah, you can always get a guide from here. Then trace requirement, yeah, traceability. Find a respective source code, respective design specification, respective test case, test plan, blah blah blah. Okay, and then output requirement. Okay, so if you want to come up with the requirement display, you can always search or find the requirement through these tools. So this actually requirement engineering tools are quite good. I've seen a few tools, but I noticed they are very expensive. Okay, so not worth sometimes because you see the overall project a lot of cost. So requirement engineering, try to not to spend a lot of money. So that's why some companies they don't invest on requirement engineering tools. Okay. Okay, so here the architecture of requirement management tool. So usually they will have a database. Obviously, all this requirement you need to manage effectively, right? So you have a database, you have a browser to search for the requirement, you have your like SQL, your query system, so that you can type your search criteria and it will give you the output. What are the requirements you are searching for? Then natural language requirement document, normal English. Okay, your requirement in the form of natural language. Notation is natural language. It can convert to other form like create a model for you. also can. Some of the tools are capable of doing that. Then you have the change control. So you don't have to think yourself finding every factor, then see whether requirement change is acceptable or rejected. You don't have to do that. You just choose the requirement to be changed. Then you can actually, this is quite smart. It can guide you whether the change is encouraged or not encouraged. Okay. Then requirement report. Yeah, you can always generate report for your requirements. Okay. So yeah, and one more main function is traceability, which is quite difficult to be done manually. Traceability is very challenging to be done manually. If you don't keep track of everything properly, very, very difficult to do the traceability. You know, when I was doing my PhD, right, just to keep track of all my articles, I read a lot of articles to come up with my proposal defense. Okay, proposal. Then we have to do the defense. Okay, defense means in front of your reviewer, and they will either accept your topic, your proposal, or reject your proposal. So you know, already gone through approval. Then only we start with our studies. But then within 1.5 years, you need to do your proposal defense. So you need to show your finding. So they can either accept or reject. So I remember I read a lot of articles. Then I keep track of all, you know, when I extract something from a document in my report, I need to go back to the document. When I want to find back, when I want to my supervisor comment, so I need to edit my report, right? When I want to edit my report, I need to find back the same article to go and see how I can edit. So just to trace that document, I sometimes feel so crazy, so difficult to do the traceability. Not easy. I was using a tool actually, EndNote and so on. I was using a lot of tools, but still so messy. Very difficult to do all this. So imagine requirement. You run a company, software company. You're not just going to run one project, right? You're going to have a lot of projects. Every project comes with their own requirements, design, source code, blah blah blah. How are you going to keep track of everything? That is traceability. You understand, Amma? So overall, you got the picture of traceability. You know what is requirement change? These are the important topics. Okay, what caused the requirement change? What is the impact of requirement change? Clear? So you have questions from this topic in final. Okay? Okay, before I end the class, can I give you some questions? Try. I will upload this question tonight. Okay, I will try to upload in the Google Classroom by tonight. Okay? I want you to try number 1. Just number 1. Can you try number 1? Okay? A scenario is given. It's a bookstore. Okay, a scenario given is a bookstore. Okay, then you have 5 questions for the bookstore. Okay, what I notice midterm test. Okay, midterm test. I asked you to come up with scope. Okay, some of you pity, you don't even know what is scope. When I was teaching, I mentioned so many times, I reminded you many times saying that the dimension, another word that I can use is scope. Okay, so see, these are the 2 words we can use, dimension or scope. Okay, then try to come up with the stakeholders, analysis factor. This is all about requirement elicitation. This one is about justification, comparing few types of techniques, which one is better. Then let's look at this one. Analyze one obstacle for software requirement. Okay? Possible obstacle for you to practice requirement. Okay, then I want you to also give a try to question number 2. Okay, question number 2, this is quite easy because the list of functions have been given. You just need to do for this function. So you need to produce a use case diagram, and then I want you to also come up with use case description for book cost. Okay? So do number 1 and 2. I will upload the question by tonight. Okay? I will discuss this paper on Friday. Okay? Let's start today. Sign your attendance, please.